You know, in fact, I had one guy tell me once you had to be an Indian to snare. This snare, I can look at the snare and know who set it. I prefer, when I snare, to put a fork stick on each side of the run, put a stick across the top, and then hook my snare to the top stick, wanting the rabbit to cave it all in when he got caught. Because he pulled the thing up through the snow, and he gets tired pulling up what we call the drag stick. And he's not as liable to throw a kink into this. This is brass wire, 25 thousandths brass, that we used to use for safety wire on airplanes. One of my sergeants now, he's just come out with a rabbit. I want to get a group of men together and have him demonstrate how to clean it. A jibwee bird snare, another system we taught of getting food to snare birds. I found when I was in the woods in Labrador that anytime you get a group of men there, the Canadian jays would gather. They always thought this was a way to get food. And you had to be careful with them because they would fly in and grab something and fly away. We call them camp robbers. Now normally when I'd snare a bird or something, I'd say, who wants this? Now, it's a valuable source of food. Somebody would come and take it. We'd help them pick it and clean it, and then help him cook it if he needed help. Here you see one of the sergeants now cleaning a rabbit. He's skinning it here. When we were working with rabbits, I always mentioned tularemia. That is the disease you can get from rabbits. I told them if you're afraid of it, it might be best to do this all with your gloves on and wash your gloves later. And when I took my turn skinning and cleaning them, I always stooped down and washed my hands with cold snow. And I felt that was adequate. One of the best game getters of all the game getters we have in the survival kits was the gill net. I suppose some of you have used it. And I brought one out that I made out of a parachute. It's sitting over on the table if you want to see it afterwards. But before the students come to the woods, I would issue them a gill net. They were not illegal in Canada where I was at. I've seen the day that I could put a gill net in and feed the whole camp with the fish I got. And just fast as they'd fill it, I empty it and fill it again. This lake here, where I did a lot of my winter training, was called Virgin Lake. This was an island there, and this cabin was on the island. I'd gone to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and asked permission to take a lot of these abandoned cabins. They told me to go ahead and take them. Put my sign up, come back and tell them. They'd mark them on the map as being off-limits to all civilians. This was a comfortable cabin in the summertime. Oh, we were running out of wood, so we would go over across the lake, real strong on the backside of the island and get wood because I didn't want the island to be denuded with trees. Now this is the winter cabin. I lived in that cabin back there for 3 winters. The first winter it was pretty miserable. The chinking had all broken out of it between the logs. I had at one time, to begin with, one sergeant. He and I would sit in there at supper time after we got the students bedded down and tried to eat. We'd light a candle. The wind would come up and it'd blow through the chink and blow our candle out. When it come time to put butter or jelly on what bread we had, it'd be so frozen you couldn't get it out of the jar. And you know it's cold when I'm in a coat like that. That's my quite cold. Sometimes in the wintertime I would go down on the big river there, the Hamilton River. There was an abandoned cabin there, and I put claim to it. The Mounties backed me up, so we moved in. This was a very comfortable cabin. This summer view out from the back. I used to tell my friends there was 2 rooms and a path. This is Sastrugi. You think around here when we have a lake, it'll freeze over layer after layer of ice. is smooth. Boy, up there you had to be doggone careful. This stuff, you can see how it blows. Now you can see the first one, but look back at the rest of them. You can't see them. Yes, you can see the shadows, but you can't see the sauce-tree. And I about piled up the C-47 on skis hitting some of this stuff. One of this sergeant, that Sergeant Cooper, he come from eastern Wyoming. He found a tree where the bears had been sharpening their claws on it. I told him, got a picture of it. In the summertime, I had trouble with bears all the time. Sergeant Jones is gone. This is in the middle of winter. He wanted to show the students how easy it is to get Labrador teeth. He's gone into the hillside. He'll bring it home and bring it back to camp and show them how to prepare it. Now back at the school, my dogs, I left some of these in because I thought probably one of you would be interested in the dogs. They were sure a pleasure to me. I enjoyed them so much. One thing about it now, you see the nice dog houses they have. If I had a female dog that was ready to have pups, invariably she'd go dig in the snow and have the pups out in the snowbank. I can never remember and one of the dogs having the pups in the shelter. They always went out in the snow. Do you remember that? I'm going back to several dog pictures here.
You had to take care of the dog's feet to keep the pigs, huh?
Say again?
You had to take care of the dog's feet so they wouldn't freeze, huh?
No, the only thing we did is just chain them to their house. They could go in the house if they wanted, but they wouldn't freeze. I never seen a dog freeze. One thing about it, one of the reasons that I justified my kitchen was so I could feed them hot food. And every night I'd get a big pitcher, or one of my sergeants, a big pitcher of Gaines dog meal, which I could draw from the commissary in a 55-gallon drum. I'd take the Gaines dog meal and I'd add a tablespoonful of bone meal and a tablespoonful of cod liver oil and a quart of hot water. Take it out to them and they just loved it. And they look good. Their fur glistened all the time. They were always ready to work. That's one thing about these dogs. If you look, with our sleds, we had a brake on the back, a thing we stepped on and claws dug down in the road, dug down in the snow. But the dogs, look at them. They're just born to pull. They're trying their best to go, even though it's locked. I just marveled at how they would go and go. They did. They go, but they broke their hearts if you know. Now out on the lake, I always tied my dogs with an individual trace from the dog to the sled, so I could spread their weight out over the ice, because those dogs are heavy. They're running up 100 pounds. I didn't use that kind in the wood, obviously, because one dog would run on one side of the tree and one dog on the other side. It does cause problems when that happens. You see we're out on the ice now. I had a lead dog named Duke that I thought so much of. So did Sandy. Now then a trapper had trapped this area before, and they'd usually build some small shelter along their trap line, but the rest of the time they would just take logs and cover it and stretch them across an opening in the ground, and they would dig a little canyon there, cover it with logs and let it snow over it, and they would stay in these overnight when he was checking their trap lines. This dog on the right, the blonde dog, my son had been hounding me for a dog of his own. I was waiting for the right dog to come, and although Malamutes it's not unusual to have a blonde one, but it's not the norm. So I took this dog home to him. Those two dogs, that dog and my son, was just almost never apart. all the rest of the time we were in Labrador. This dog here was one of my favorite dogs. She had run off while there was still snow on the ground, and I figured she was going to have pups. But she broke her chain, that I never found her until the snow was gone. I tried tracking her, but we would either cover her tracks or she'd circle back in a boot name. But when I did find her, she had gathered her pups up, and I took her pups back, and she died 3 days later. I got the vet down there, and he said she had pneumonia. Here's the rest of her pups. They're cute little animals. When we had VIPs come down, I usually would put the dog and take them for a ride. It seemed to be a great thing. And especially if you were having an inspection, take one of the inspectors for a ride, you always got a good ride up. Now this machine here I had made so I could exercise my kids and the dogs could play with it. No, I said that backward. I built so that it could exercise my dogs and my kids could play with it. Okay. You see that, well, in fact, that little girl with the white shirt on in the back pushing is this lady here who's a grandmother many times over. But the kids would get out and push that around the yard when I wasn't using it. And this year, when I was watching the pictures of the Iditarod, I saw contraptions like this built, where it had steering mechanism and four-wheel brakes. I thought, why didn't they get smart and patent that thing before I ever left that Labrador? So it was somebody else's idea, but I could have cleaned up on it. Now, one of the highlights of my tour up there is they were hurting for pilots. They just didn't have enough pilots. And so I volunteered. If command was willing to shut down my school, I would go up and fly on the dew line. And so I went up there and met with some experience. I lived where you see there, Coral Harbor, Southampton Island. And I flew that airplane while I was up there. That C-47's on skis. Now, the man that was the head of the project was a lieutenant colonel named Shaw. He had a lot of experience in the Arctic. And he'd hired 2 Eskimos, one on each side of him. And he hired them as laborers. But one time, I'd stopped the airplane where he wanted to get out and do some exploring and looking around on the ice. And the first thing I would do was I carried 3 Herman Nelson heaters. My crew and I and the sergeants would get them on, start the heaters up, and put a heater duct up at each engine and one up in the cockpit so my instruments didn't freeze. This one particular time, I'd got everything going, the heaters were going, and we were running short of time. And this colonel said to me, "Do you suppose some of your air crews could give us a hand? We're just hurting." He wanted to dig holes to see how thick the ice was to determine how heavy of an airplane we could bring on. So I said, "Sure." And one of his men took the man on the right of the picture, and they took off. I said, "Well, I'll take the man that's on the left." And he couldn't speak English. I couldn't speak Eskimo. But we went out, and he and I started digging a hole in the ice. To dig the holes, they issued us spuds with a 6-foot hardwood handle and a big ladle with a 6-foot handle. We'd chip the ice, take the ladle, take the chips out. We'd keep working our way down till the hole got deeper and deeper. And finally, he and I together, we hit water. And I hollered up for Colonel Shaw to come down there. He had a big caliber. And he stuck the caliber down under the ice, brought the top of it down. And our hole was 8 foot, 8.5 inches thick. Can you imagine that much ice? 8 foot, 8.5 inches. It was kind of fun working with this man, but everything I'd want something done, I'd make a panel line, and he'd laugh at me, and he'd so make a panel line what I should do. It was kind of fun, even though it was hard work. Now, while I was working out there, a guy that had been my former student had bought this apartment from an Eskimo woman. and he gave it to me. I think he didn't like it, but I sure did. And I used it when I was on the dew line. Now around my face is Wolverine that the Eskimo lady had sewed. Under my chin was rabbit fur. It was so soft. And the rest of the hide was caribou. I'll tell you, that was a wonderful uniform, wonderful department. Now I'm over in the capital city of Labrador, which is Northwest River. That's the name of it, Northwest River. And over there, the only way they can get around, look how old that fella is. Take a sled, hook the dogs up, and the way they all travel. Here the ice is starting to break out. The first spring I was there. Something.
What month was this taken?
This would be April. The picture of the young man down there in the white canoe is a hunter with a single gauge shotgun, 12 gauge shotgun. He'll paddle out to where the ice is floating down. He'll pull the white sheet over him. He'll put 2 shotgun shells in his mouth, and he'll float right down into a flock of geese, take the sheet back off, and he'll shoot all 3 rounds before the flock gets out of range. And I thought it was real good shooting and real fun. That's the Hamilton River. Now here's a native. She's going to put in a gill net. They too learn how effective gill nets are. You see it doing it this way takes quite a bit of work to chisel out the ice, especially if it's very thick. I taught my students to put a hole on each end and a hole in the middle. Tie the gill net to a long pole, slide the pole in the first hole, push it over to the second hole, then get it to the second hole and push it to the third hole. While you're doing that, you're dragging your gill net in. You got floats on the gill net at the top, weights on the bottom, and you load them up with fish. I just can't emphasize how good a way that is to fish. It's so effective. In fact, it's illegal in the state of Utah to even have a gill net on your person if you're in the vicinity of a trout stream. This man here is Coachman, this man named Coachman. He's from Dartmouth. He's a professor at Dartmouth College. He's doing a hydro study of the rivers there in Labrador, and I was invited to go on one of these expeditions. We put one of his boats in the boat we were in, and we tied my canoe on the back. And we started up the rivers. This is the young man that was taking care of the main boat. When we got up there, one man was having to use the transit and the other man working, and I didn't have any other job. I told him, teach me to use the transit. So I take a shot up the river to get the axis of the flow of the river, then turn the transit 90 degrees, and they get in boats, and they start going out into the water. And by hand signals, I tell them whether to go forward or to back to keep the bow of the boat always on line with the transit. And then every 10 foot, they would measure the depth of the water and the velocity of the water. And when we were all done, they would determine how much water was going down that river. It was real interesting to work with them and watch that. There you see a native out there putting in gill nets.
Are we above the Arctic Circle?
No, you're just under the Arctic Circle. When we were on the dew line, we were just short. The area that we flew in did cover the Arctic Circle. In fact, I can tell you right here, we were 53 degrees north. How I know that? At night, we give night orientation classes to star reading, and you remember we determine our latitude by measuring the altitude of the flare. I'd have crews in, invariably that would get it right in the head. The L-20, this was a fun airplane. In between classes, I draw this airplane out and I fly around and try to find a suitable area for my next class. I'm always looking for game trails, places where there's plenty of firewood, where there was water. I just enjoyed this airplane so much. The SA-16 again. Now this, normally when I would graduate a class, and I'm out on my next class, the previous class is getting one of their airplanes and come and buzz me. It happened all the time. And I enjoyed it. Most of the students enjoyed it.
How often did they bring you in food supplies?
Food supplies, I'd go out for 9 days. I'd give my students only 2 days, 2.5 days supply of food, because I wanted them to get hungry enough to be able to trap a rabbit, skin it, gut it, and eat it, cook it and eat it. Now, I was 3 miles from this homestead here, and I thought maybe I better go down and check into these people. I didn't want them to get alarmed, and they knew there were a bunch of soldiers camped further up. I got one of my sergeants, and he and I got in there, and we paddled down here. And we entered with this garden. There's a garden in the foreground here. And there was a lady working there. I didn't realize it until I got up. She saw me, and she grabbed a kid under each arm and yelled at her other children. And I run up the house, slammed the door, and I heard the bolt yelling. I knew she was frightened. So I just waited a while, hoping. I figured there was a man she'd contact him. He never did show up. So I left. 3 days later, I returned, figuring the man would be there. And we eventually become the best of friends. Because I was taking a lot of this. His camp was on the Kenemish River. And I had my students between the Kenemish and the Kenemu. I told them, don't ever cross the river, and you'll never get lost. I'll find you if you get lost. If you cross one of the rivers, you might get lost for good. One thing about it, when I come out to see these people, I usually go up to the officers' club and bum the old magazines from the club officer. I'd get an armload of the old, how life used to be so popular, the Look magazine and whatnot. And gee, they enjoyed that. They didn't have any papers being delivered, no radios, no nothing. Here he is. His name is McLean, and he's going out to get some fish. If he got a good load of fish, he'd flag down one of the ferries that would come through and sell the fish right there while he was still on the water. And he had a son that was a year older than my son, and a son that was a year younger than my son. So I would occasionally take my oldest son out there and leave him there while I was teaching survival. Now here's what I wanted to show you. See that canoe mold on the left? After I met McLean and I come and saw what you do with it, then I had to have that canoe mold that I had found way up on the river. And I really made an effort to get it out and I thought that's the only canoe mold in captivity, the one I had in my museum. Now that the Americans have moved out of Goose Bay, I don't know what happened to all the artifacts that I had gathered. But here he's showing you the boat he's making. And look how neat that is, that canoe. Now, at this point, he turns it over to his wife, and she buys material at Hudson Bay, and then she sews it on. And after it's all sewed on nice and tight, then he gets a paint, I don't know what it is, and he paints it, and it makes a marvelous paint. The boards in that building, I asked him about them. I said, his dad had built this home. I said, when your dad built this place, did he have a sawmill? And he said, no, we did whipsawing. I said, what is whipsawing? He said, you build a platform about 10 foot high out of strong logs. And you lean some more logs against it, and then you roll the logs you're going to saw up on top. Then a man gets above and a man gets below, and you saw the length of the log. I always thought I never wanted to be the man who was below. But all the lumber that went to build these buildings for that homestead was whipsawed like that. One day I went there, and they had their own little cemetery in the backyard. Here you see Sergeant Jones reading all that number. Well, anyway, there was a fresh dug grave. And so I went and hunted down yelling at him. We got together and I said, Mac, have you had a tragedy in the family? And he said, no, why do you ask? I said, well, there's a fresh grave dug there. Oh, he said, Ma's 92 years old, and he said, she's not gonna make it through the winter. He said, I can't be out here digging through the permafrost, so I thought, how morbid that is, you know, how practical those people are. And the next year when I came, I said, where's Ma? And he says, she's out in the grave. I asked him, I said, does Ma know you're digging that grave? He said, oh yeah, she's told me for years she wants to be buried next to Dad. Here's a grave I found way out in the boonies, and the writing was Eskimo, and I couldn't read Eskimo, but Willie, this is Willie Knudsen again, he could, some dialects. I brought him out there, and the fence was all tore down and everything, but he couldn't read it. It was a dialect he wasn't acquainted with, but he and I put this fence up and wired it together. This is the Grand Canyon of Labrador. When we had VIPs, we always tried to get an airplane to fly them out there. You follow that river down. It's a mighty river. This is the Hamilton River, and it goes into a set of falls. And that falls is nearly 300 foot. It's mighty falls. It's called the Grand Falls of Labrador. Up at the top of the picture, you see the biggest lake in Labrador. That's Lake Michikamau. A lot of times I go out there and fly an SA-16 out there, take some of the guys with us, tie the SA-16 up at an island. We'd hunt ptarmigan. The ptarmigan are great flyers, and if they'd have wanted to, they could have flown from the island to the mainland. I guess they just didn't realize they could do it. And we'd get a bunch up and flush them, and they go land, and we'd fly over there and get a couple hours of flight. We just follow them around and around the island, and we really get a nest of ptarmigan. This is taken of the base. Our house was on the outside loop and on the far side. And at nights, a lot of times my wife would tell the kids, I have 4 children there, get your lessons done, we'll have some fun. So when everybody was through with the lessons, we'd go to the back window, she'd open the curtains. Chances are we'd have a beautiful display of northern lights. We saw some of the most beautiful northern lights up there. But if it happened to be a night where there were no northern lights, we could watch the foxes and the different animals come into our garbage. And the kids were really entertained. This here river is the Minnenipi River.